Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we had the normal cabinet meeting. This was chaired by me as Deputy Prime Minister. As you know, the Prime Minister is in Auckland and remains as the Prime Minister until the birth of her child. In the meantime, I'm assisting by carrying out her Wellington-based duties. Looking ahead to the week, I'll be in Parliament to attend question time Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. In my capacity as Prime Minister, I'll also meet the visiting EU Trade Commissioner Maelstrom, one of two significant EU representatives coming here this year. And on Thursday evening, I'll be taking the Kia Awards in Auckland. First, some comments on the industrial relations papers or issues before I pass over to the Minister of Health on specific issues relating to the nurses' dispute. This government has inherited 9 years of underinvestment in our public services and public servant wages. The priority of the government has been to rebuild our services. We invested heavily in the budget into health, education and the police. That means more teachers, nurses and police. Minister Clark will speak shortly on the nurses' pay offer. But let me say this, our government is committed to ensuring our nurses and teachers and other front-line staff are paid a fair wage for a fair day's work. That's why our offers to date across the public service have been higher than that which was offered by National. In fact, the nurses' $500 million deal is the largest offer to that group of workers in over 14 years. We also worked hard to raise the pay for those who need it most. A lot of our frontline public service will benefit from the Families Package and increase in the minimum wage. Just last week, we extended the living wage to all core public service workers, raising the pay of the 2,000 lowest paid public service workers employed by the government to a living level. However, we won't be able to fix all the problems in just one pay round. It takes time to fix neglect. We have to balance competing priorities and make sure we have the money aside for a rainy day. This government will exercise fiscal constraint. We have to balance the books and run a strong economy in order to afford the pay claims public servants are making. And we need to run a strong surplus to cover the cost of unforeseen events like embos and natural disasters. So our approach is measured, planned and delivered over time, and focused on a fair result for teachers and nurses while maintaining fiscal discipline. Can I now pass on to the Minister of Health for questions in the nurses' dispute before opening up to general questions? Any questions for the Honourable David Clark?
We need them at the microphone.
No, you need the questions first and not put them at the microphone.
Minister, is there any room to go further than the half a billion dollars, or is that can you draw a line under the sand?
Yeah, that is, I suppose, the Minister of Finance's job. But look, that is the best offer we've been able to support it. It really is the extent of what is available. We've been clear about that, and the DHBs have begun long ago contingency planning. So I can assure people that life-preserving services planning is well advanced. The nurses and the DHBs are working constructively on how those life-preserving services will be put in place. Emergency services will be working as usual and so on. So we're preparing for the worst, but having said that, both sides have given encouraging signals that they are keen to look at facilitation and mediation, and so I'm encouraged by that.
Do you think the DHBs could have handled this better, the negotiations?
I think the DHBs have done what they can with the resources available. As the Deputy Prime Minister said, we have to balance wage rounds across the public sector, and they've tried to structure a deal that actually goes further than the independent panel recommendations. And factually we can say that the majority of nurses under the proposed deal would be more than $10,000 better off if they were full-time nurses within 18 months. So it is the most generous offer in over a decade. and I think the DHBs have put their best foot forward. Everybody is unhappy that we haven't got across the line, because I think everyone agrees that nurses should be paid better than they are now, but it takes more than one pay round to address 9 years of neglect.
A
Do
lot
you
of
think
things
seven
about the
expectations
DHBs
are raised?
Sorry.
Do you think expectations have been raised unfairly for this Labour-led government?
Look, I think expectations are high, and I don't blame people for being hopeful, but we've been really clear that we put our best offer out there in terms of the DHBs and the funding that the government put out. The government has taken a decision in this process to put forward an extra $250 million, nearly doubling the deal, in order to put forward this best offer. So, people have to know that that's the money that's available, and that's the
Do
situation.
you take responsibility for fueling that hope, that sort of unrealistic hope?
Look, no, I don't. I believe that everybody wants the nurses to be paid well, and people across the public sector to be paid well. But we've sent a clear signal that we've had to make sure, and the DHBs have had to make sure that contingency planning is advanced if the nurses would vote against this offer.
So given as you've said, this is probably one of the best offer, the best offer they've had in a decade, and you have expressed disappointment that it hasn't been accepted. Do you feel like that the unions have met DHBs and the government halfway on this?
I'm disappointed, but I'm hopeful a little bit, given that both sides have said they want to look at whether strike action can be avoided. And I want to thank both sides for being willing to continue to look for ways to avoid strike action. Nobody wants strike action. It will mean disruption of services if we find ourselves in that position, and if there is a way through, we'd like to know what it is.
Do you
But in
think
terms of
unions
the
are
offer,
having a
is
bit of
this
a-
the
do you
final
think-
one? Is that what you're saying? There's no
Yes,
more.
we have a fiscal limit, and we've put out there the money that we feel we can put out there.
Do you think that the unions are having a bit of a go because they were expecting a union-friendly Labour-led government?
I think this is the best offer we could put out there. We put an extra $250 million in beyond the original offer, which was already more generous than the average offer under the previous government. As I say, I'm disappointed, but I'm hopeful that a way through can be found.
So given this is the best offer from the government, but nurses aren't happy with it, do you think a strike is now inevitable?
I'm hopeful that the parties can get around the table. We're open to looking at different ways of structuring the deal. If the nurses speak with their membership and find that they would like to prioritise this funding differently, obviously we want to make sure that our safety concerns are addressed, and we've said that explicitly. But if the nurses think there's another way of structuring this, then we're open to hearing that.
How confident are you that you could reach a structure? I know you're hopeful, but how confident?
Look, I'm hopeful. It's the DHBs and the nurses who have to do the negotiation. So I trust that they will work together. They both put out statements saying that they want to work together to try and find a way through it.
What are the fiscal limits you're talking about here, the funding limits?
Well, of course, this settlement is dependent upon the money that we've set aside for the nurses. Beyond that, of course, there are other settlements that are still to come that will in some ways look to what's happening here. They're separate, and we've tried to also draw the distinction by saying actually the nurses are in a unique situation where they don't have the steps, and one of the things that the DHB offer did was go beyond the independent panels offer in spelling out what those steps would be and when those nurses could hope to be better off. Of course, there is always fiscal limits, and governments still have to balance the books and meet the budget responsibility
So
rules.
why
to your question.
are you saying you can't afford it when you've got a budget surplus of $3.5 billion and an extremely low net debt level?
Well, again, probably a question for the Minister of Finance, but the fact of the matter is we've committed to governing responsibly, to meeting the budget responsibility rules that we've signed up to reducing debt over time, and also to making sure that we are more fairly remunerating people over time.
Are the nurses being greedy?
Look, I think that we've covered the subject as comprehensively as we can possibly do it with Mr. Clark here. Any other questions?
On Pike River, the police have reopened their investigation. Are you pleased by that?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Beg your pardon?
Are you pleased the police have reopened their investigation into Pike River?
They never closed their investigation. It means now with the possibility of entry, they can complete it.
Do you think there'll be some sort of prosecution out of this?
Well, look, before you prosecute people, you've got to find some evidence, and that hopefully it can be determined either way with access to the entry.
What are you expecting to find down the mine?
Substantial evidence, as much as can be gleaned, of what exactly happened and when it happened.
Anything in particular, and are you still...
No, look, this is just now speculating on what neither you or I or anybody else, including the experts, could possibly prognosticate this far out.
Is your offer to be first down the mine still on the table?
Yes.
Have you talked to anyone about, in the Pike River Recovery Agency, about being first one into the mine?
I wanted you to know very clearly that I made that statement a long time ago, a long time before anybody wanted to enter the mine, because I do have an experience of mining or working underground, in fact 11 miles through under the ground, so it's nothing new in terms of danger.
Would it be responsible though for you, Mr. Peters, to be the first one in?
Well, what's wrong with that? If that's your major issue on the 18th of June 2018, well, I'm happy to answer it. Or maybe that's because you care about me, I don't know. And let me just say, I'm going to keep my promise.
You've made your offer. Has anybody indicated that they'd like to take you up on it?
They're possible, yes. I don't know. Not at this point in time, no.
What do you make about the trade developments between you
Well, I
and...
just want to say, my point, Mr. Sober, is that the fences being put up by the previous government were without any validity whatsoever. That's why I made the statement, because I believe it to be true. And people like Forster, who has a marvellous background, probably the most experienced person at the time, also agree.
Mr. Peters, do you believe that the Prime Minister should be handing over the acting Prime Minister role to you now while she's unable to attend Cabinet and things here in Wellington?
No.
How do you,
Can you walk us through the process of how you will find out and how you will be notified of
I
that?
think the Prime Minister's already walked you through the process countless times. I'm just picking up the ends of the process, and things will come to fruition in possibly a matter of days' time.
And
No,
acting
just
as
the process that you will find out. Will you receive a text message, or how will that information flow happen?
Well, if you want to know, possibly it could be 5 variations of how I get told, but either one of them will work, and then we'll be in the process that the Prime Minister has said would begin, with me being the acting Prime Minister.
what are the
What are
5
the
variations?
Pardon?
What are the 5 variations?
I knew you'd ask that. One of the media people rings me and says it's happening, as they already have, and I've told them they're wrong. Oh, I get a phone call from the Prime Minister, that's number 2. Number 3 is a text. Number 4, my Chief of Staff tells me. Or number 5, her Chief of Staff tells me. Maybe there's 10 variations, but I'm giving you the 5. Is that adequate for you?
As acting Prime Minister, will you get rid of post-Cabinet press conferences?
You know, I never said I would. I said I'd take the advice of my staff, and I have, and I'm here.
so,
But you're not acting Prime Minister yet, are you?
Well, you could say it's a bit of a curtain raiser, couldn't you?
Can we return to the comments of Mr. Jones about Fonterra last week? And do you endorse his call for Damien O'Connor to include a restructuring of Fonterra in the Dairy Industry Review, Dairy Industry Act, Restructuring Act?
There are a number of aspects to DIRA which Fonterra want, and they want that restructuring. They, for example, don't want to be required to supply all and sundry, including their export competitors. So there are aspects to that legislative proposal which they want.
Do you favour or support the idea of restructuring Fonterra into more than one company?
Well, you'll have to wait and see what emerges out of DIRA. But there are a lot of reforms which people at Fonterra want, and which a massive number of massive percentage of the farmers want.
But the terms of reference, or the press statement that O'Connor put out about the DIRA review, made no mention of restructuring Fonterra into multiple companies.
That may be the case, and I'm not suggesting that that's what will happen, but it is possible in a thorough review that conclusions emerge which weren't apparent at the time you set the terms of reference. And surely you'd admit to the possibility of that being a sound policy.
Mr. Peters, a question on trade.
I did just one thing before you slide past that. We made our comments on Fonterra and its performance a long, long time before the last election. You need to know what the loss was to the New Zealand farming community, and indeed the taxpayers for those farmers who say we should pull our head in. It's $1.383 billion, including probably over $100 million of taxpayers' money trying to sort things out on the wharves and docksides of China. It's a far bigger picture, and I think that we will not become a great first world trading nation at the top of the world in terms of trading nations until we face some blunt commercial facts.
Do you believe John Wilson should step down?
Well, I'm not giving you my comment on that, but I do believe in a thing called commercial accountability, as we also believe in political and journalistic accountability.
Do you believe it was appropriate for Shane Jones to call on him to step down?
Mr. Jones made a private comment, and surely people are entitled to give their private view at a Chatham House Rules occasion. Mr. Jones's mistake was to think that in the Chatham House Rules environment that other people understand, people would actually keep their word.
Well, that's not what happened. He told media after coming out of the House, he specifically said it wasn't in Chatham House Rules.
Well, with respect, that what he spilled from the meeting before he even got out of the meeting.
Not that aspect.
But he's effectively repeated it in the House as a minister.
Well, it was a fact by then. It was out in the public domain.
Well, okay, was it appropriate?
Did you want him to deny what he'd said in Chatham's House environment?
Who leaked Fonterra information?
Pardon?
Mr. Jones volunteered the information about what he said about Fonterra. I don't believe anyone had said that until he said it.
No, I knew that there was a leak from there because I was coming there and straight after Shane Jones. I knew there'd been a leak before I even got there.
The leak was about working groups and Mr. Jones's comments about whether there were too many working groups, and the media asked afterwards, and in two separate situations, after the House and then in Parliament, he repeated those statements clearly in the role of a government minister.
I know what he said in Parliament. I was there. But I'm talking about the circumstances that led up to that and to the question being asked in Parliament. But whilst you're on about that, what was the National Party doing about this massive loss to our economy, to farmers, now compounded by a possible 800 million loss to the economy again in turning the farming community to be into a safe community? When you have losses like that and there's nothing being said from the so-called party of the farmers, you've got to wonder, why are they making complaints?
But the question was about whether it was
exporters,
appropriate for a
Peters.
government minister to make comments about the future of the board of Fonterra, the chair of the board of Fonterra.
Look, with respect, we've all got different views, but Mr. Jones said it was his personal view. And for a start, I am not one who wants to shut people down from having a broad discussion about the soundness of future policy.
What do you think of business confidence surveys?
Well, the business confidence survey is best epitomised by the highest share market we've ever had and the highest performance that the world is currently having when it comes to a share market is ours. Maybe it's a better barometer than what you might call professional bias.
Do you think it's irresponsible of the banks to provide such a relief?
Our exporters have resumed their booming trade with Iran. I wonder what steps the government is taking to ensure that in November, when President Trump invokes the secondary sanctions on those trading with Iran, what steps is the government taking to ensure that $200 million a year trade doesn't go down the gurgler?
Well, it's taken all the steps it can take thus far by trying to, through our allies, persuade the US to stay. That failed. We've not given up on trying to see whether or not the US can come back under circumstances which would resolve this issue. And other than that, I can only speculate on what else we might do in the meantime.
Well, one thing you could do, potentially, when you're talking to Cecilia Malmstrom on Thursday, is that the EU has talked about creating an arrangement between the central bank and the central bank of Iran to bypass the SWIFT banking and dollar-denominated trade to ensure that trade can continue. Would you be willing to consider that in relation to the Reserve Bank?
Oh, well, I can't say what we're going to, how we're going to respond to that until it's been put to us by that representative. She may or may not say that. And I think if it has merit, you have to look at the merit of the value of that when it happens. But I do know that the European Union has done its best to try and persuade the United States that that's not the right pathway down which they should go.
So we might just lose the $200 million trade.
No. There's no room for you. There's no need for you to go into a fit of gloom and doom. At this point in time, we've got months to see how we can turn this thing around in the interests of our exporters and the interests of our economy.
When you announced the coalition in October, you said, "We in New Zealand First believe that economic correction or a slowdown is looming, and the first signs are already here." What evidence have you seen of an economic slowdown so far since you've been in government?
The weather, the longest and best summer we've had for so long, might have been good for the holiday maker, but it wasn't good for the economy. And I think that you may well see, I'm not prospecting that, but you may well see that already in the next emerging quarter that comes out.
So is there issues around the agricultural sector then?
Well, no, you asked me the first question was why would I say that, and amongst other things, I think a correction at the time was worth me mentioning. But also, if you want a more immediate and obvious one, it is that there has been an effect to the long, dry summer that most New Zealanders enjoy.
You said it before summer.
I know I said it before summer. I gave you the distinction already. I said there was a reason why I thought that. But if you want a more immediate reason, I just said, it is the summer quarter, which will be measured by April in the next emerging figures.
So you think that because of this long, dry summer, the GDP figures coming out later this week are going to be a little bit downbeat because of that?
No, I said that possibly, maybe.
How much contact have you had with the Prime Minister today?
Today, I've had 2 phone calls today.
Was she?
Was she happy? Yes, she was. Thank you very much.
Did she attend?
I'm not going to come down here to a press conference and start talking about a private conversation over the Prime Minister.
I'm not asking
Do you
about the
mind?
conversation, Mr. Peters. I'm trying to ask, did she attend the cabinet meeting via telephone?
Well, you can't attend by telephone.
Is that because the teleconferencing facilities don't work in the cabinet room?
So how did it work? Did she?
You know, when confidentiality is to the extent that you have to leave your phone outside, perhaps teleconferencing is not the best idea.
So she wasn't in.
Otherwise,
involved in it.
soon there'll be not just the Prime Minister, the other absent ministers, and then probably other absent ministers' families, and the whole thing will not be what it should be.
The Prime Minister wasn't in the cabinet meeting, and you were acting.
The Prime Minister was in Auckland
So he didn't-
today.
So
He
did you
wasn't
talk to
involved
her
in the cabinet.
beforehand?
Pardon?
Did you talk to her beforehand? Is that how it worked in this?
No, I talked to different matters.
Has New
So
Zealand?
how did it work? How does it work with when you're chairing it and you're not? Can you just do that as Deputy Prime Minister? Is that normal?
Well, it's not the first time. I was doing it 22 years ago,
Has New Zealand?
chairing cabinet meetings.
What has the government reaction been to Bridges' offer to develop a bipartisan policy on climate change, and what areas for compromise do you see between the government and National?
Well, actually, I observed that program on the weekend, and I wasn't quite sure what, with respect, Mr. Bridges was saying. But all I can say is that this government has been working on serious climate change policy, which we hope to have a buy-in much, much wider than the coalition and the Green Party at this point in time. And we welcome the input of every political party and in fact every organisation. We see it as an issue that's got to be above politics if we are going to realise just how serious the issue is.
Sorry, Mr. Peters, was today the first time there was a cabinet meeting held that there wasn't an acting Prime Minister or a Prime Minister present to chair?
Well, the answer is, I don't know if it's the first time or it's the 50th time, but today that's exactly what happened. The Prime Minister wasn't there. There was no acting Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister chaired the cabinet meeting.
That was unusual, you would say?
No, it was happening for decades ago.
Have you had any briefings from Peter Hughes since you lodged legal action against him?
Me?
Yeah.
No. My staff? Yes.
Is that how it will work? Is that
That's how it's working. That's how it's working. It's working like a charm.
Does the government have confidence in the no surprises policy and how it functions at present?
Well, the first thing that I noticed from the media comment is that a general misunderstanding what the no surprises policy is. It's got to be a surprise for it to be a no surprises policy. It can't be malicious gossip. That's not a no surprises policy. So I'd invite you to understand what the concept means and the reason why it was set up in the first place.
So you do think it's being misused at present by...
Well, if you take a wild guess, I can't say much more because it would offend the sub judice rule.
Well, is the government looking at reform in the area though? Not looking at any specific cases, but is the
Well,
government...
right now, I think everybody's looking at one specific case.
If you win that case, will you keep the cash?
And with retrospect, again, one of you people talked about me being paid by the taxpayer to bring this case. That kind of journalistic laziness is really intolerable, given the number of cases that I have financed over the years myself, and it's cost a fortune. But I'm not here to say other than that. I'm doing it because it has to be done in the interests of a sound democracy.
Is that a yes?
And if Nicky Hagar can rightly get, in the end, after many years, some justice at court, then I applaud him and do not think he did it for anything other than the quality of society that he hopes to live in.
So you'd be personally...
Thank you very much.
Peter, Cecilia Armstrong.
Very nice person, yes.
Mr. Peters, why did you consider getting rid of the post-cabinet offices?
Look, I've asked all those questions. I'll see you next time.
Why did you want to scrap it?
I did not want to scrap it, never said so in the first place. This is my last answer. I'm answering up there, not over here like you know, your style. And I said that I'd take the advice of my staff and they've given to me. That's why I'm here.
And you will continue them?